The Roaring Twenties were the period of that great American prosperity, which was built on shaky foundations. Paul Getty. Hello, my name is Camila Schuler, and today I will be informing you about 3 significant things that happened during the 1920s. This is important because it is Americans' history, and we should learn about our past and our history. I'm credible to talk about this because I have researched thoroughly about this topic and have written papers about it in high school. So firstly, we will be talking about the economy. Secondly, we will be talking about women's fashion. And lastly, we will be talking about the music and the invention of the radio. So firstly, let's talk about the economy. According to the 1920s Economy by Kimberly Amando, written March 8, 2022, the economy grew 42% during the 1920s, and the United States produced almost half of the world's output because World War I devastated large parts of Europe. New construction almost doubled from $6.7 billion in 1920 to $12 billion in 1926, end quote. By researching the booming economy of the 1920s, we can gain a better understanding of what life was truly like back then. With the rapid rise of prosperity, people spent more money and were able to experience the luxuries of life, such as fashion and entertainment. So now that we have a better understanding of what the economy was like in the 1920s, I can inform you about how women's fashion changed because they had more money in their wallets to spend on clothing. In the article 1920s Women Fashion, History Part 1 by Debbie Sessions, quote, Coco Chanel is credited for changing the look of women's clothing in the Roaring Twenties. Chanel was one of the first women to do the unthinkable. She wore trousers. Her style is heavily influenced by men's leisure wear, giving women what they wanted. It wasn't just young women either. All ages embraced the new, freer clothing, if not for the sake of being fashionable, then at least for the sheer comfort of it, end quote. Only a few women could afford Coco Chanel, but the effects of her fashion heavily influenced the women's industry for that time period in the 1920s, and we can still see it heavily influencing in today's fashion. So after learning a little bit more about the women's fashion, we can now discuss what the music was like in the 1920s. So in the article Radio and Music in the 1920s, United States by Amy Tennant, written in 2020, quote, music in the 1920s in the United States had a variety, to say the least. Jazz, blues, swing, dance, band, and ragtime were just a few of the most popular genres of the decade. With new inventions like the radio, and since more households were able to afford the radio, music was able to connect people all across America. Instead of just hearing music in bars and concerts, they were able to hear it in their homes, where everyone could enjoy it. Quote, the decade started off in 1921 with just 5 radio stations and ended with 606 stations, end quote. Radio and Music in the 1920s, United States by Amy Tennant. Now that you have learned about the 1920s, we can recap what we have learned. So today we have learned about the economy, women's fashion, and music, and what life was like in the 1920s. I hope you can research more further about the 1920s, as it is an essential part of the U.S. history. Thank you for listening to my speech.